Hello, everyone. Marie Burns here from Mind, Money, Motion. I've been taking a few minutes each month to share some information with you, one chapter at a time, about my book, The Before Financial Checklist. So this month, the chapter is all about common estate planning mistakes. And when you stop and think about it, choosing to do nothing in advance about something negative that you absolutely know is guaranteed to happen does not seem logical, does it? And yet human nature is that we avoid thinking about these negative things, which is why a majority of Americans still die without estate planning documents in place, for example. Does that make sense when the result to the surviving family members will almost certainly always be either delayed settlement, increased cost, which when you think about that means less to the heirs, unclear wishes, which leads to feelings of frustration, maybe suspicion, all kinds of additional paperwork, more time commitment, and unnecessary family arguments. Who wants any of that on purpose? The good news is that most of those negative results are preventable. But the bad news is that even if you do take the time and put those estate planning documents in place, we often make very common mistakes in that process. And it's usually because we don't know what we don't know. So I invite you to listen on and read below so you do know. Common estate planning mistake number 1. So if you drafted a will or a trust on your own without an attorney, maybe using one of those online templates, we need to be aware that those are typically not state specific. So they may not be the best option in all cases. A self-drafted document can also be more tempting for family to contest after you're gone, since there was no licensed legal advisor involved, and the likelihood of something being missed or inaccurate is much higher. I met a couple once who had used one of those will kits that they had purchased online. And when they had an attorney review it, they discovered that the will was invalid because they had missed initialing one page in the document, and that made the whole will null and void. So it does not always pay to go the cheap route up front, as you may end up paying more to fix things later. Another common mistake is failing to keep adequate records. A complete list of assets, check out my link to options there, and family information will help tremendously with estate tax and distribution requirements. Along with locating and accessing those assets, often comes the need for accessing passwords. So yes, there's another list that's important as well. Fully considering who will be your executor or personal representative or successor trustee is another common mistake. Often deserves more attention than people may realize, because it's common for us to name family members out of obligation or trying to avoid offending someone. But these are some distinct responsibilities that often require organizational skills, comfort with paperwork, and an understanding of the required processes. So choosing the right person who is both competent and understands your values is really critical. A fourth common mistake, and I know I've preached ad nauseum about the importance of this, is updated account titles and current beneficiary designations. Those are 2 additional common mistakes, not realizing that those details dictate where the asset goes, not the will typically. And lastly, not considering the importance of planning for incapacity is another estate planning oversight. It won't happen to me, or so we think. And yet I know we all know someone who ended up in the hospital unexpectedly. And in those instances, someone had to make medical decisions and sign financial forms while that person was unable to. So having powers of attorney in writing for both healthcare and financial responsibilities really ideally should be completed in advance of ever needing them. There are a few other areas. I wouldn't call them mistakes, but they're certainly important and yet often very overlooked. deciding whether you want an immediate or springing power of attorney for your healthcare document, for example. Be sure you are discussing that with your estate planning attorney, who can explain the difference and then talk to you about which one might make the most sense, springing or immediate in your situation. It's also great to make it a habit to pull out and reread your documents. They say every 3 to 5 years, or when the law changes, which seems to be happening more frequently, or when you've had a change in your financial or family circumstances. It really helps to have an estate plan outline. I have a resource for that. It's like a bullet point summary of all the details so you can see it all at a glance. And even when you think that you don't have any changes that need to be made, it's still good to call the attorney and ask if there's been any legal changes, any law changes since your last draft that might need an update in the wording. And don't forget about that personal property disposition list. It's a big word, but it can be as simple as a handwritten list on a piece of paper. This is your chance, if you have specific wishes, to clarify who gets what on personal items, things that don't have a title. So if you want your mother's wedding ring to go to your niece, or a family heirloom to go to a specific son, or a coin collection to a certain grandchild, you can just describe the item, spell out the exact name, don't just say grandson, grandchild, the name of the recipient, and then sign and date at the bottom. You can keep that paper right in with your will or your trust, and then feel free to rewrite it, sign it, date it, and replace it at any time that you need to make changes. I won't care about any of this. I'm going to be gone, you might be thinking. Or maybe you do have preferences, but you find it really kind of depressing to think about, let alone take action on any of these end-of-life matters. Like they say, though, death and taxes are those two uncertainties in life. We are certain that our life will end at some point. And like everything, awareness of how to make that time less painless for those left behind is the first step toward action. So you read this, you listened to this, you're aware. Now it's up to you to take action, which is really the next step that counts the most.